Okay, good afternoon. Welcome everybody to this panel organized by Privacy Salon and CPDP Brussels. And my name is Pablo Trio Kramczak. I'm a legal researcher at the Free University of Brussels. And I will be the moderator of this session that will dive into the balance between digital innovation and data subjects' rights in the realm of digital identity. Well, digital ID systems play a pivotal role in driving Industry 4.0, e-government, and digital inclusion across sectors like healthcare, finance, e-commerce, public services provision, and other data-driven areas. The integration of digital ID with data protection poses many challenges. Issues such as lawful processing, data minimization, purpose limitation, and data protection by design and default are part of these concerns. Our panel will address personal data processing in current and future Latin American digital ID initiatives, while considering the impact of the new GDPR-inspired data protection laws. We would like to foster a deeper understanding of the data protection dimension in the governance of digital ID and digital wallets. Against this background, I would like to suggest several questions for the panel's consideration. For example, how do digital ID systems work? How they operate? And what privacy risks do they entail? How can organizations and policymakers strike a balance between fostering digital innovation and upholding data subjects' rights in the realm of digital identity? We have an stellar panel, including academia, practitioners, civil society, and experts from international organizations. Some of them are not with us physically today, but I hope they are hearing us now. Well, I won't take any more time. Well, I would like to invite our first speaker. I think that Marcos is not there yet. I'm afraid no. Well, we will start with one of our online speakers, with Andrés Chomsik Penedo. Andrés is a legal researcher at the Law, Science, Technology, and Society Research Group at the Free University of Brussels, and an academic fellow of the Brussels Privacy Hub. Moreover, he also serves as an expert for the EU Blockchain Observatory and Forum. His research focuses on the data protection and privacy challenges posed by digital financial services, with several articles and book chapters on these topics. Andrés is going to refer to some legal regulatory considerations related to digital identities and digital wallets. Andrés, thank you very much. The floor is yours.
So, hello, good afternoon. I think that for all of us, I mean, can you hear me well, first of all? I'm assuming that yes, unless Paulo, you said.
Yeah, yes, we can hear you.
Okay, great. So, I mean, first of all, thanks for the invitation, for the opportunity to join the session. Of course, of organizing it alongside Pablo. It's a pity that I cannot be there in Brazil, but I have some family issues that I'm taking care of here. So. Do apologize for that. I think that probably for next year is going to be a pleasure to join you there in Rio. So a little bit going and making some changes in the original organization of this panel. I think that I'm going to be starting and maybe doing a little bit of an introduction of kind of the things that we are seeing when it comes to digital identity and some of the new developments that are coming in this area. So basically, I think that when it comes to digital identity, we can see clearly that there is a trend within a bigger issue that is clearly the economy and the role that data plays within different economies. We are seeing, particularly in Europe, a development of this EU data strategy, this focus on making data available, and as part of this idea of making data more available, for example, to develop systems and whatnot. We're seeing that there is a lot of emphasis on the role that data subjects and people in general have when it comes to making this data available. We can see clearly, and probably the rest of the speakers are going to be, developing a little bit more all these ideas. Clearly, as part of this goal of involving people within the data economy and making them have a say in that situation, we are seeing this emergence of these digital wallets that Marco and then Sophie are going to be, expanding a little bit more on them. But clearly this idea that data should be controlled by individuals, and then they should be the ones who are deciding exactly how this data will be used in different scenarios. And in this sense, we can clearly see that there is obviously a change in kind of how identity systems are being organized. I mean, typically, if you look into the history of how different identity systems have been organized, you can clearly see the presence of a central authority, typically the state, the one who controls, and for example, gives out digital identity cards and similar documents to identify who is exactly in the context of a given country, for example. Of course, as we move into kind of the digital arena, we are seeing that these sort of centralized systems are, we can say, crumbling, or they have certain limitations when it comes to that. And particularly, one of these alternatives that are starting to appear, for example, is all these systems that are being labeled under the so-called name of, for example, self-sovereign identity systems, which in most cases use blockchain technology, for example. And of course, this opened a whole new kind of discussions when it comes to how all this data that can be associated with identity is being processed and used, for example. It's not just, in this case, the issues that we can typically see in the case of, for example, a digital identity system, how exactly will a given government use this information that is going to be stored in the database, but also we are adding a little bit more of a complexity into the situation with the use of these technologies. No, we are adding the whole issue with data protection and blockchain. I mean, I think that probably since the appearance of the Bitcoin protocol back in 2008, 2009, and a couple of years after that, we have seen a lot of developments either in academia, in industry, in international organizations, a lot of either papers, policy documents, even regulation in some cases recently, that they tend to put a little bit of this discussion around exactly who controls the blockchain, who is, for example, a data controller in that context. And obviously, if we take that into the whole identity situation, it becomes a little bit tricky. For example, the whole premise of these self-sovereign identity systems is that individuals are the ones controlling their identity, and also are the ones who are, in a way, validating or interacting with other individuals, and also consolidating the different elements of their identity. So, in a way, we can, open up a lot of discussions, especially when it comes to data protection. For example, what is the role of individuals within these systems? Are they data controllers? Are they data processors? What happens when they engage with other people? Are they also, for example, data controllers for that particular processing activity? So we can see that these kind of systems obviously introduce a lot of complexity into the situation, and of course, it's not just a matter of trying to answer or finding answers to a single processing activity, but rather a processing activity that is embedded into a much larger ecosystem. And obviously, we can see that there is a lot of tension in that situation. And obviously, we can question, for example, why this situation has, arrived at this situation in particular. I think that in this sense, there are two key concepts that are making a fundamental role in this situation. Is that in most cases, if you look into the different policy documents connected by different organizations that are trying to push the involvement of data subjects into the data economy, you can see that a concept that keeps repeating in the different documents is, for example, the idea of trust. The idea that data subjects should be trusting into these technologies, trusting into these processes, so that they enable the sharing of their information through their consent. And if you take a look at, for example, how trust is being formed, it's not as much of a straightforward concept, but rather you have to take trust into consideration of the context. It's not the same, for example, if you're dealing with an identity system managed, for example, by a trusted third party. I think that a concept that probably Sophie is going to be expanding a little bit more when we tackle into the ADA situation. Or, for example, if you're engaging with another party that is not a trusted third party, it's not part of those schemes. So clearly, the idea of trust plays a key role exactly into how exactly these developments are going to be integrated into that situation. And of course, it's not something that is just a matter of, in the case, for example, of these self-sovereign identity systems that are aimed at, empowering data subjects, but also it's a little bit more about the different levels that are part of a digital identity system, not just of the individuals, but also the relationship that the individuals have with regards to the companies that are going to be using this information, but also with regards to, for example, the governments that are also going to be, in most cases, are the ones who are going to be funding the system. For example, in the case of the EU, we have seen the development of these blockchain initiatives or ecosystems to enable or support the development of these systems. And also, for example, if we take a look into Latin America, we have seen that different international organizations have funded different schemes for these kind of situations. And of course, if you see the interplay into the different levels, individuals, companies, states, you can clearly see that kind of the requirements or the elements that are going to be constituting that trust are different between one another. It's not the same, what do I want from another person to trust into that person, in contrast to kind of the elements or things that I'm going to find trustworthy when it comes to engaging with a company, or for example, the elements that are going to be finding trustworthy when it comes to engaging with, for example, a government for the issuance of certain credentials, certain elements that are going to be part of my digital identity, you know? And in this sense, I think that's something that also is starting to appear in this scenario. For example, is in the case of, for example, free trade agreements between different countries and different jurisdictions. We can see that there is, for example, a mutual recognition of the digital identity systems that are being developed. It's not just a matter of, you know, an individual stuck in a country, stuck in a jurisdiction, and just engaging with that particular government, but rather a very bit broader part of the situation of individuals engaging in a digital economy that, in a way, kind of, I wouldn't say limited borders, but make them a little bit more fuzzy and allow for the free flow of information in that sense. So I think that I'm going to be cutting it there and just trying to summarize that, and we can probably follow it up in the Q&A section, but just highlighting the issue that in most cases, these self-sovereign identity systems are also, for example, bringing alongside the issue of the use of blockchain technology, and of course, the issues that come along with the application of this particular technology, and also in situations, for example, kind of the typical questions that emerge with the use of this technology. For example, can data be erased? Is data always available? And for example, the right to be forgotten is not applicable or cannot be enforced in that situation. So I think that those kind of tensions are going to be start emerging. And of course, being a sort of international, if you want to call it technology that knows no boundaries in that sense, these kind of tensions and the need for, you know, an international approach to these topics is actually is necessary. So I'm going to be cutting it here, Pablo, and yeah, we can probably follow up then in the Q&A section.
Thank you very much, Andres, for your very interesting presentation. I would like to give the floor to Sophie Stala-Bourdillon. Sophie is a professor in IT law at the Free University of Brussels and the Brussels Privacy Hub, and principal legal engineer at Immuta Research. She's also a visiting professor at the University of Southampton Law School of Law, and where she held the chair in IT law and data governance until 2022. Sophie is the author and co-author of several legal articles, chapters, and books on data protection and privacy. She's editor-in-chief of the Computer Law and Security Review, a leading international journal of technology law, and has also served as a legal and data privacy expert for the European Commission, the Council of Europe, the Organization for the Cooperation and Security in Europe, and for the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. Sophie is going to provide us a general overview on the EU approach to these issues, the European perspective on digital identity and data protection. Sophie, thank you very much. The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Pablo. Can you hear me? Is this working?
Quickly.
Okay, so let me see if I can share my screen.
Great, we can see your presentation. Thank you.
Okay, wonderful. So what I wanted to do, and by the way, thank you very much for the invitation. I apologize for not being able to be with you today. Also for family reasons, I had to stay where I am now, but hopefully I'll manage to be as clear as possible, and we'll then have more questions on the topic. So I wanted just to give an EU perspective on digital identity and data protection, and make the claim that, as always, the devil is in the details. When it comes to EID in the European Union, we speak about EIDAS. What is EIDAS? It's a regulation that has been adopted to govern electronic identification, authentication, and trust services. That was back in 2014. It became fully applicable in 2016. But as of today, we now have on the table a new proposal to actually amend the 2014 framework. So we speak about EIDAS 1.0 and now EIDAS 2.0. But before describing at a high level what we have in EIDAS 2.0, let's say a few words about EIDAS 1.0. What was the ambition there? So there are many things in EIDAS 1.0. Not only does it govern some aspects of electronic identifications, not everything. It also governs some trust services. But for the sake of the talk, let's say a few words about electronic identification. There are two important principles. The first one being about the interoperability of national EID schemes, and the second one being about an obligation of mutual recognition of national EID schemes once they've been notified to the European Commission. The goal is to try to allow EU citizens to use their national EID means when accessing online services from other EU countries. So the ambition is here not to create an EID scheme at the EU level, but to make sure that once we've got an EID scheme at the national level, then that can be used to access public services from other EU countries. And in EIDAS 1.0, the ambition was to push for the development of these schemes to access first and foremost public services. Accessing private services was always at the back of the mind of the drafters. They mentioned that for sure in the recital parts of the regulation, but with now EIDAS 2.0, this is becoming a typical use case. So with EIDAS 1.0, the ambition was to create an interoperability framework so that it was possible to send electronic identification from one member state to another member state. And so we've had with the regulation some implementing acts which specify the requirements for a framework. And in particular, the sending of set number of elements each time there is a cross-border flow that push forward electronic identification. And so when we want to assess whether an EID scheme, an EID related data flow is actually compliant or aligns with data protection requirements, what we need to do is to go into the details and look at the way the architecture has been built and see whether in particular it is flexible enough to accommodate a variety of use cases. So what? One thing that we've been doing after the adoption of EIDAS 1.0 was to look at the interoperability framework and see whether it did align with data protection by design and the different principles that we have in GDPR, in particular in Article 5. The assessment led to a variety of questions, but there are 2 points in particular that I was mentioning here, in particular in relation to dynamic or data minimization. If you want to do data minimization well, what you would want to do is to make sure that you're able to tailor the amount of data that you're processing or sending to the recipient of the information so that he only gets the data that he needs. And so what we saw is that with the requirement of having every time a minimum data set within or attached within the data flow, then it was not possible to do selective disclosure. Again, the use case was only access to public services, so that was less problematic, but the moment you extend the scheme, then that becomes a problem. And at that stage, because within the minimum data set, we had names, date of birth, persistent identifier, and then linkability was not really mitigated. It was not the first priority. But again, once you extend the scheme and want to push for the adoption of electronic identity means for a variety of use cases, then that becomes a problem. And so one recommendation that we made in the paper was to try to argue that we needed to modernize the interoperability framework to take into account Article 25 of GDPR and key data protection principles such as minimization and purpose limitation, which is usually translated into unlinkability requirements. What's happening with the IDAS 2.0, as Andres mentioned? Some very interesting things, and in particular, the introduction of what is being called digital ID wallets that are becoming or should become a must-have. What is a digital ID wallet? Essentially, it's an interface that is actually managed by an individual, a user, who will be able to share personal identification data or other types of electronic attributes. And the idea behind it is to try to make sure that the wallets must enable verification of a range of attributes, and not only person identification data. So the idea is here to facilitate selective disclosure. So the ambition is bigger here. The goal is to ensure your citizens have access to ID means. As Andres mentioned, the traditional EID schemes are quite centralized and are not always used very often. And so we want to make sure as well that the EU citizens can use them for a variety of purposes beyond identification. This is where it becomes very important to be able to distinguish between identification and authentication in particular. Again, when we look at the proposed regulation and the potential architecture and reference framework that would come with the regulation, then we need to be asking key questions. Are we aligned with the data protection principles and the requirements of data protection by design? And there are two key requirements: dynamic minimization or minimization, but you want to do that dynamically to adapt the amount of data to your specific use case, and then unlinkability as an expression of purpose limitation. So if you read the intention and actually the outputs of the work of the EIDAS working group, we do see that the intention is to make sure that the digital wallets enforce privacy by design, although facilitation of privacy by design, for some reasons now, has been removed from the text of EIDAS 1.0, and that selective disclosure of attributes is also becomes a reality. That being said, when we look at some of the words that are actually included within the proposed regulation, then we see things like this. So digital identity wallets should in particular provide a mechanism to ensure that the relying party is able to authenticate the user and to receive electronic attestations of attributes. So if the relying party, the one who is actually receiving the attestation, is also able to authenticate the user, then it could mean that the relying party is also going to get some identification data, because there is a problem with the definition of authentication and identification within the IDAS. There is not a clear distinction there. So it might be one reading of this would actually undermine selective disclosure. And just to give you an example, which is a very topical example, age verification, it's becoming the solution to online safety. You see it in EIDAS 2.0. You also see it somewhere else, DSA and the rest, all the new data regulations. Well, many of them mention age verification when they are worried about children. And one of the idea behind it is to say, yes, we've got the solution, we've got the IDAS, we can do now age verification, so that should not be a problem. Just here, I just want to, by showing you this diagram, I just want to show you that, again, we need to be very careful and look at what are the data flows that are actually enabled by the architecture, and the default digital identity wallets to make sure that we're actually achieving a high level of data protection by design. When age verification is a must do, you want to make sure that your user is able to tell the website that he is, let's say, above 18. So he will want to access the website, then he will receive a challenge, and then he might use, if we've got an external host for the wallets, the confirmation of his age that is then going to send to the website. But we want to make sure that the relying party, my website here, only receives what he needs to answer his question and not more. And in this case, we clearly don't need to send the personal identification data because identification is actually not a requirement. So that was just to give you an example and show you the importance to actually of going into the details here and looking at the way the architecture and reference framework is actually being defined. To do the full assessment, because one thing we don't really want is to generalize identification obligations to many private online services by pushing forward digital identity. So with this, I think I can stop.
Thank you very much, Sophie, for this very insightful presentation. I know that you need to leave earlier, but all this information you provide us will be very very useful for the conversation, the discussion we will have during the Q&A session of this panel. Thank you very much for being with us today, and well, I hope to see you again here in person in a new version of the CPDP Latam. Thank you very much, Sophie. Well, our next panelist is Marcos Allende Lopez from the Inter-American Development Bank. Marcos is a physicist working on blockchain, quantum, and self-sovereign identity. Marcos is the technical leader and coordinator of the LACChain Global Alliance. He coordinates the development of the infrastructure and the technical support to blockchain projects. He plays this role from the IT department of the Inter-American Development Bank as an IT specialist. Marcos has published several articles and papers on blockchain and quantum technology and their potential for social impact. He's going to provide us a general overview of the present and the future of the digital wallets from a technical perspective. Thank you very much, Marcos, for being with us today, and the floor is yours.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me well? Okay, thanks, guys. I think I have a couple of slides over there. If you can upload them, I'll introduce myself as a complement to what you were saying in the meantime. So and actually, I'm going to try to be not so technical. I'm gonna align most of what I'm going to say with what Sophie was explaining about the very interesting efforts in the regulatory area that the European Union is taking towards identity wallets and the use of even decentralized ledgers for this type of attestation.
Marcos,
so
sorry, can you share your presentation through Zoom, or is it possible for you?
Yes, absolutely. I thought you guys were going to share it, but yes, 100%.
It will be better if you can do it directly. It's not an issue.
Okay, I'm going for it.
Thank you very much.
Can you see it?
Yes, thank you very much. Perfect.
Got it. So thanks so much for the invitation to the event. I would have loved to be in person, hopefully next time. I've been working in these areas that relate to blockchain technology as a new generation of trust registries that allow different parties to rely on the same data registry. And also, what are the new forms of identification and what are the new generation of digital assets that are coming in relation to these ledgers. So the first thing that I would like to share with you is three papers that we've published at the Inter-American Development Bank. One of them was actually led by Andres. This third one on the regulation analysis, like the regulatory analysis, the one on the right. The one on the left is an overall presentation of what is self-sovereign identity, what is the new landscape for user-centric identity, digital assets, blockchain, and digital wallets. And the paper in the middle is a framework, a set of recommendations that we developed in order to implement these new solutions for digital identity and digital wallets using these new technologies and the standards that are coming out of international associations. So what's happening right now is that, I'm going to stay here for a second. What's happening right now is that we are entering a new digital age, okay? Some people are calling it Web3, some people are calling it Web5, some people are just calling it a new digital age. To me, the way I see it is, we are starting to see a new generation of applications and platforms that are using a new type of technologies and that are, focusing on the of the ownership of the assets by the end users in a different way. So basically, now we are entering this stage of applications and platforms where instead of using just like websites and browsers to interact with different applications, we're going to start having one element that is a personal digital wallet, where we are going to be able to store information, where we are going to be able to store credentials, where we are going to be able to own assets, and that we are also going to be able to use for electronic authentication. So no more using Facebook for authenticating to websites, or no more 1,000 users and passwords. This new generation of digital wallets should be able to allow us to do all those things just with one click from a mobile application. So in this new digital asset age, it is important to understand and identify what are the different actors that are involved in the process of issuing credentials, in the process of issuing assets that we as individuals manage in a digital wallet. So connecting with what Sophie was explaining, there's a new regulation coming from Europe that is IDAS 2, and there's also the EU ID framework coming from Europe that are establishing a new framework for how digital wallets that incorporate private services and public services and products can be incorporated into this mobile application that we own as individuals. The way this works is basically, in all these cases, there's an issuer. It can be the government issuing a government ID. It can be a private sector company issuing tokenized assets. It can be, any kind of thing that you can think of the form of a credential of a token. There's an issuer for it. There's a holder that is the subject that receives this in a wallet. And then there's a verifier that in the case of the credentials is someone that we present these attestations to. For example, the government saying that we are over 18, or that we have different identity information, and then we want to present to the verifier that we are over 18, as Sophie was presenting. So the verifier is this, third party that only wants to verify this information, and that, the easiest way to verify this information is having a trust registry that is easily accessible, and when that information can be verified in real time. So today, in the digital age that we are
Marcos,
right now,
can you hear us?
Yes.
We are not hearing you so well. I don't know if you're experiencing some issues with your mic. Can you check that? Because we are trying to solve this locally, but probably it's not here.
Yes, let me try to connect from the phone. Maybe the connection, maybe it's a problem with my internet. Give me just 1 second. In 10 seconds, I'll switch out.
No, we are not hearing you well.
I'm switching to the audio in my phone. If you give me access on the phone, I will try to use my phone audio.
Mm.
Do you see my phone asking for joining?
The people that is connected through Zoom experience the same issue. They are not hearing you well. Yeah.
I'm asked to speak, so I'm speaking just to check if this is a Marcos problem or if it's another type of problem.
Recording in progress.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we're hearing you better.
Okay, sorry. I'll try to resume from here. I just switched to my phone audio. Sorry, guys, I apologize for the inconvenience. So basically what I was trying to explain is that we are entering a new generation, like a new digital asset age, where one of the elements is having entities issuing credentials to us that we can store in a mobile wallet, specifically in a phone, in a mobile app, and that we are going to be able to present these to third parties that are going to verify this information. In the new regulation that is coming from Europe, and also that Latin America and the Caribbean countries are implementing from a regulatory and from a technical perspective, we are going to use all type of data registries in order to verify this information that is in the credentials. And the use of blockchain specifically is very interesting because blockchain as a decentralized technology allows different parties that are issuers, holders, or verifiers of information to be easily connected to the same trust source, to the same reliable in order to be able
a little bit, because probably we're experiencing some issues at a local level. Let us check 2 minutes if we can solve this problem here.
Okay, so you cannot hear me?
Not very well, but I think that the problem is probably here, because we hear Sophie when she jumped in, and we heard her in not a proper way.
Okay. Just Sophie, Andres, are you able to hear me well? Yes?
Yeah, perfectly.
Okay.
Here, the organizers are asking us to for 3 minutes in order to solve this issue with the sound. Okay, they are trying to solve this. Just 3 minutes. Okay. Well, we are going to continue with Marina. You know Marina very well. Marina Meira is head of projects at the Data Privacy Brazil Research Association, where she leads the local and international work on digital IDs. Marina holds a law degree from the University of Sao Paulo and is a master candidate in scientific and cultural dissemination at the University of Campinas. She holds a postgraduate degree specializing in digital law from the University of Rio de Janeiro. Marina has large experience working on research and advocacy on digital rights in civil society organizations in Brazil. Marina is going to address some concerns related to digital identities from regional and domestic perspective. Marina, thank you very much. The floor is yours.
Hi, thank you very much, Pablo, for the invitation. Let's jump in. We'll hopefully solve all the issues, and while we don't do that, I can contribute here with some of my views from the civil society standpoint. I think that's important to note. And I think when it comes to digital IDs. Well, we conducted research at Data Privacy Brazil. I'm saying we because Marina, who's sitting across from me, was also part of the research. And we called our report. Our report analyzes the Brazilian digital identity system, digital ID system, actually. And we called it the dilemma between visibility and exclusion. And why is that? I think that's a good standpoint, and I'll try to address that from the Latin American, Brazilian, Latin American perspective. It is, well, in theory, it is necessary for individuals to be visible to states in general, for them to access services, for them to have rights. And that is the reason why, that was the main argument why data protection laws were established at first, right? I mean, decades ago, for individuals, for that the data to be to have a proper flow, and for individuals to be able to know who would access that data and to have rights to oppose them at first, well, before states, but now, of course, before all sorts of actors. So that is the visibility side of things. But in order for individuals to access services, and the state says that they have to be identified, and the state usually does that through identity systems, and the states have been pushing in order to do that through digital identity systems. And we can question that. I will question that. However, once states do that, once they digitize the systems as a whole, what is actually happening, and we're seeing that in Latin America, but worldwide, is that they're excluding people. They're excluding people who are already excluded, who are already marginalized. So in Brazil, for instance, we have this digital identity system. Well, we have multiple identity systems. Brazil is a bit messy when it comes to the digitization of public services and of identity systems as a whole, because we have many policies happening at the same time, and it can be quite confusing even for us who are researching that to actually understand what's in place. But basically, we have a centralized identity system that has been, the government has been trying to put in place since the 90s. And that is really flowing alongside the digitization of public services. So now we have this very, very large centralized biometric, not only biometric, but also biometric database that is used for citizens to access the gov.br platform, which is a platform where all public, the federal government's public services are being digitized, and that's where you have to access them. For you to access that platform, you have to be registered in that very large database. And most people are, but not all people are. Not all people in Brazil have a civil registry. And not all people in Brazil, even if they are registered in that civil registry, they might not have access to the internet in order to access that digital platform. They might not have digital literacy in order to actually understand how to navigate that platform. However, they need to access that platform to do several things. So, for instance, to declare their taxes, or to access their pension benefits. And well, the list just goes on and on and on. So that's what I mean when I say that systems that were supposed to include people, well, systems that were supposed to make people visible to stage so that they could access rights, they could access public services, they're actually excluding people. So that's why we called our report the dilemma between visibility and exclusion. And I feel that so the questions here, I think also for the panel, were regarding whether digital identity systems and also all innovations that seem very interesting, that my colleagues were mentioning from Europe, how they will impact Latin America as well. And well, Latin America was colonized by Europe. So a lot of what happens in Europe is replied here. And not always do we actually think about if it should be applied here or if it should just be applied the same way it's happening in Europe. So it seems a bit problematic for us to think of innovations regarding, for example, that actually address that digitizing services or adding technology to the public service, that is actually going to make people's lives better. Is it? I mean, there's so many people in Latin America who don't have access to the internet. And I already said it, but I'm saying it again, or who don't know how to navigate those services. And the tendency is that once we digitize services or policies as a whole, that we use the machines in order to mediate the connections with people. So the tendency is that there are less and less analogical or physical spots to actually help people access those services. Is that really gonna include people? Also, when we think of we want people to be identifiable so they can access services and so they can be empowered. And actually, we want people to be empowered over their data, right? That's the whole idea behind data protection and self-informational determination. But if people have to enroll in digital identity systems or have to hold EID wallets in order to access services, how empowering is that? Who are we empowering? And what kind of consent is that, or what kind of legal basis is being used? If people, well, in Brazil, for example, people were not even aware that this super centralized large database was being created. It was created by law. There was no public discussion. It was not it didn't include civil society at all. And I'm speaking from the digital rights civil society, which is very strong in Brazil. We can usually dialogue with the public administration much more than other sectors of civil society who also need to be involved in this discussion, because the digital identity discussion, it is in fact, and it should be a data protection and a privacy discussion, but it's much more than that. It's much broader than that. We were discussing it this morning in another panel with Mariana, Juan, who are here, and other colleagues. So to wrap up, I think it's important to note some things. So from the Latin American perspective, I think we have to think locally when we think of these services. And then, I mean, we need to think of self-sovereignty for us. So we need to start or come back, in the case of Brazil, investing in public, in the development of national programs, national infrastructure, digital infrastructure. We had that for some time in Brazil, but that stopped many years ago. And now we're basically, well, just importing a lot of technologies to our infrastructure. Is a lot coming from Europe and from the US and from China, well, from other places. We also, I think, need to question ourselves on whether if digital is really better. Are digital identities necessarily better? Is digitizing public service necessarily going to be better? Is it going to empower individuals more? Our individuals, and not general individuals. And when I say our individuals, is actually acknowledging and recognizing how diverse and how also Latin American countries are structured, have structural inequalities as a whole. So I think that's one thing. We have to question techno-solutionism. And another one, and that's, well, a more practical, I would say, solution, perhaps. When I think that we want identity systems so that they can empower citizens. How can we do that? How can we achieve that? Our data protection laws, well, the Brazilian data protection law, which is very much inspired by the GDPR, it brings the idea of data protection impact assessments. And that has been really one of our goals, the policy goals that we've been addressing at Data Privacy Brazil. So the idea that digital identity systems, well, whether they're foundational, as the World Bank calls, but whether they're national centralized systems or decentralized and more specific systems or initiatives, they do process data in large scale. They usually process sensitive data, but well, they are very important. If they're not working properly, they will not, people will not access their rights. So data protection impact assessments or other kinds of impact assessments, but they should be conducted, and they cannot be a simple checklist as we have seen them being. Second, they should be conducted before any of these initiatives are actually implemented. That's also something we have not seen. And third, they have to be public. They have to be publicized so they can be scrutinized by civil society and by everyone who can do that, right? Who should do that. I think that's how we can actually achieve empowerment to people when it comes to digital identity systems.
Thank you very much, Marina, for your presentation and the different perspective to the discussion. Thank you very much. Julia, do you think that Marco, are you there? I think that we can continue with your presentation.
Yes, I'm here.
Yes. Okay, we can see you. Yes, not anymore. Okay, we can hear you very well.
Right, can you hear me and see me now?
Okay, we can hear you very, very loudly. But
all right, great.
Okay, can you share your slides?
Yeah, absolutely. Let me go back to it. So how would you like me to do it? Do you want me to go like a quick walkthrough from the beginning, or do you want me to get it from my left?
I think that you can resume your second slide, probably.
Okay. All right. So, no, thank you guys, and I'm sorry for the inconvenience again. I love to be there.
It was our problem. Don't worry about that.
Yes. So, okay. So just to go back to where I was. First, I recommended these three papers, okay, an introduction to this new age of digital age, a framework for the implementations, and a regulatory landscape that was led by Andres, who presented before. These three publications are available at the IDB website. I was also saying that in this new age of digital credentials, that is going to be the base for the new age of digital assets, where we are going to have both the credentials and the assets in mobile wallets, in digital wallets. The structure, okay, is something like this. You have an issuer that is an organization that issues a credential to us. It can be the government issuing a government ID, a driver license. It can be a health entity issuing a COVID certificate or a vaccination credential. It can be a university issuing a diploma. We are going to start collecting all these credentials that contain attestations about us issued by trusted entities. So we're going to collect these credentials in a mobile wallet, that is a mobile application. And then we're going to present these credentials when we decide to do so to third parties that are called verifiers. These verifiers are going to have access to some kind of trust registry where they can verify these credentials, these attestations. And now the new element, in addition to the wallets, is the use of decentralized registries like blockchain networks as the trust registries that we can use in order to verify these attestations without having to go directly to the issuer. Today, without these decentralized trust registries or without these accessible trust registries, what happens is that every time we present some kind of digital information to a verifier, the verifier would need to go to the issuer, whatever the issuer is, and ask the issuer directly, hey, is this information, is this credential true? And that is, of course, very inefficient, you know. If we can have all the stakeholders connected to the same trust registry, okay, because it is open, it is decentralized, then that facilitates a lot the verifiability of information that is in the form of digital credentials, okay? So this is the message here. And this is what regulations in Latin America and the Caribbean, regulations in Europe, frameworks for technical implementations are enabling and are establishing, okay? Now, the next thing that I want to talk about, and this is the last slide, of course, is what are these digital wallets gonna be useful for? Because as I said, credentials is gonna be the first thing that we are gonna have in the wallets. Are gonna be all kind of credentials from all kind of use cases and industries. But this will serve to build our first layer of identity in our wallets, okay? But after we have these digital wallets that are user-friendly, that are regulatory compliant, that are secure, and that we have a first layer of identity and credentials with it, we are going to start seeing a new generation of other digital assets. And with that, we are going to enter this new digital asset age. So among these new digital assets, we are going to see utility and commodity tokens. For example, carbon credits, biodiversity tokens, like corporate tokens, for example, badges, loyalty tokens in order to be exchanged for products and services, digital coupons, like different kinds of value that are represented by tokens that we can start having also in our wallets. Then there's going to be this new generation as well of ownership tokens. This includes things like real estate, the tokenization of real estate, the tokenization of electronics, the tokenization of automobiles, the tokenization of even virtual assets. These things will start to be received as well in our wallet. And the benefit of this is that when we want to transfer these assets in secondary markets, instead of having to go to a notary, so we sign a paper, and then we decide if we make the bank transfer in order to transfer the asset. In the case of a car, we give the keys or we give. So with all these things, we would be able to transfer assets from a wallet to a wallet and receive the payment from a wallet to a wallet in real time, integrated with the public registry, like with the public registries from government, and also integrated with whatever registries are necessary with the private sector as well. Okay. And last but not least, we are seeing the emergence of a new generation of ways of digital money or representations of digital money. That includes, the emerging central bank digital currencies, that includes stable coins, that includes tokenized money, that includes cryptocurrencies. Each of them with a different level of evolution and a different level of adoption and regulation. But this is a new way of representing money with tokens that we are going to be able to have in this wallet. So this idea of the universal wallet that combines all the elements from identity to assets to money is what, is coming, and is what these new technological and regulatory frameworks are framing. So as I consumed already some time in my previous presentation, and this one, I'm going to stop it here. Of course, I'm ready for any questions now or later. Would love to engage with the participants and see if I can solve any potential doubts. Thank you again for the invitation.
Thank you, Marcos, for your presentation. Sorry for the inconvenience. And well, we are trying to move pretty quick for our next speakers. Last but not least, Javiera Sepúlveda. She's a partner at Bidlaw, a Chilean law firm with extensive experience in IT law, e-commerce, technology transactions, fintech, data protection, privacy, and cybersecurity. She's a co-chair of the Chilean chapter of the International Association for Privacy Professionals. And Javiera holds a master in commercial law with an specialization in I-law from the University of Melbourne in Australia, and she has more than 12 years of experience in technology contracting and data protection issues. She's going to address this topic from the private sector perspective. In other words, the main challenges that these systems entail for the industry. Thank you very much, Javiera. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Pablo, and thank you to the organizers for having me. Well, after having listened to my fellow panelists, hardly listen sometimes, I think we can all agree in the fact that digital identity is a private public issue, right? And if we really want to achieve this so-called good digital identity, we need to bridge the collaboration between public and private entities, and of course having the citizens always in the center of the discussion. I'm here to talk to you a little bit more from the private perspective, as Pablo was saying, because it's my field of work. I'm a privacy lawyer, and I work as a legal advisor of companies, of course. And I think one of the most important findings we've seen lately is this change that, like, the management of digital identity is being transformed from like a purpose-driven necessity towards a self-standing activity that is a resource to multiple digital applications in several industries, for sure. But if I have to choose, I would choose fintech industry as a remarkable one. What we are seeing is that these tools of digital identities offer like a cost-effective and easy and secure way for individuals who lack of in developing countries mostly, who lack of formal identification documents to prove their identity, and therefore to be able to access financial services that previously they were unable to reach out. So it's been a good mechanism to achieve financial inclusion, but also to its digital identity mechanisms are being instrumental for financial institutions to comply with know your customers regulations and anti-money laundering regulations. So I think if I have to like choose one of the industry with the most impact where digital identity is having, it's probably going to be the fintech industry. But as much as I would love to talk more about the benefits that we're seeing in the private sector, I'm going to go straight to the challenges we're facing, because I think it will better enrich the conversation. And first and foremost, I want to talk about interoperability. I think we need to demystify the fact that the adoption of these decentralized digital identity mechanisms, it's going to be smooth and seamless. It not always going to be like that. We need to understand and assess that the implementation of this new digital identity system will have to coexist with existent digital identity systems in place already by many companies, not only because they wanted to improve their services and products, but also because they had to comply legal obligations, as it happens, for example, in the financial institutions and financial regulations around the world. So interoperability is crucial for developing efficient and useful digital identity ecosystems. And we can find this interoperability in like 3 levels, right? The first is within the system. I mean, interoperability between subsystems, which basically consist in the communication that devices and components need to work together, right? And a good example of this is biometric formats, for example, capture during the registration process, and those capture during the authentication process, or images capture with devices from different vendors, are smart cards and readers. There are a lot of examples, of course, but that first level goes to that field. The second level is between systems, right? In order to exchange communications and in order to also facilitate requests systems have to communicate between themselves. So here, I think a good example is the communication that we find with service providers, right? That are like the reliant parties of the system or stakeholders in general. And the communication can be provided through interoperability layers, through web services, through APIs, even with direct connections as well. And the third level is with other jurisdictions, right? And here I'm talking about cross-border frameworks and of interoperability and this mutual recognition of credentials issued by one country to be accepted in another country, and this is what's happening, right, with the European Union and the new regulation. So to face this challenge, I think the key is technical standards. And standards understood as a set of specifications and protocols that are like the backbone of the technical architecture of a digital identity system, and that like universally establishes universal accepted protocols and good practices and quality measures, and in general like protocols to try to understand, like in a common way, the way that data is being collected, is being stored, and is being used. We have many standards in place already. Some of them from certain international institutions like the ISO or like the NIST, but also, and I want to like remark this, also a lot of standards coming from the private sector and from like the industrial consortia, right? Like OpenID Connect and W3C web authentication. So a regional good example is, and connecting with the financial industry as well, is what's happening in Latin America with open finance systems. We're challenging, the implementation of open finance systems, and there's been an initiative from the FinTech Pacific Alliance. I think I got the name right. Who just published this like open standard for the implementations of open finance systems to be like to try to uniform its implementation in Peru, in Chile, and in Colombia. Another challenge, big challenges. I don't have the time, to go more in detail, but big challenges, of course, privacy and cybersecurity, which is like a fundamental concern for the digital identity and the companies. And here the challenge is not just to comply with different local regulations, which are different. I'm coming from a country that we've been discussing for 5 or 6 years, the Bill of Law in data protection, but also to adhere to international principles, to implement these privacy enhancing technologies, the so-called PETs, and of course security measures in every aspect of the digital identity system. And here there's a lot of literature, right, about the controls that might be implemented in privacy and security. But I think if we have to choose, and if I can like just name the main controls, we need to talk about data minimization. We need to talk about data hiding by encryption, by pseudonymization, by tokenization or anonymization even. We need to talk about separation of data processing as much as possible to try to fulfill the purpose limit principle, and also to try to avoid this like complete profile of consumers as much as possible again. we have to talk about as well about aggregation to try to remain the less personal data as possible, and of course information to data subjects, right? We need to be constantly informing data subjects about how their data is being processed, and to give them like tools to control the data processing of their data. And well, just to finish, I would like to to share with you that for me, for what I've seen, this is a, like, if you really want to get on board of this trip to evolve to a decentralized digital identity system, we really need to understand that this is a people's challenge as much as a technology challenge, because real and meaningful collaboration is needed. Like the network, the full network effects will only take place if companies, if governments, and also if another ecosystems are accepting each other's credentials. And I think this is the only way to really enjoy in the future, hopefully in the short future, really trusted and sustainable digital identity ecosystems.
Thank you very much, Javiera, for your presentation. It was very interesting to put together all the different visions regarding this topic, and I'm glad to hear all the different perspectives in order to how do we need to address all the problems, all the not just problems, all the challenges that this kind of system are posing to us today and for the coming years. We have 14 minutes left. I think that, well, I would like to have a little discussion with all of us regarding one topic that was in some way addressed for each of you, and in some way directly or indirectly related with centralized versus decentralized self-identity models. And I would like to ask you to refer regarding, for example, the pros and cons from the privacy data protection perspective. What are the main data protections and privacy concerns regarding each of these models when deciding, because we are having this debate regarding picking another model, and I would like to start asking the people online, the speakers online, your vision regarding these two models in terms of which offer more guarantees from the data protection perspective. I don't know, if you in 2-3 minutes maximum, what do you think about this question? Marcos?
Yes, I'm happy to jump in. So I think the problem most of the times is that when people talk about like decentralized identity or decentralized sources for the verification of identity, some people said it in the wrong way, or some people understanding in the wrong way. The identity is not in a public registry, or is not exposed publicly in no cases. Like the only difference between like decentralized verification or centralized verification is the data source. In the picture that I was showing before, the individual has all their data, information, and credentials in a mobile wallet. And that doesn't need to change whether you are using a decentralized or a centralized scheme. The only difference is what is the data registry that whoever you present your credential to, that individual or entity is going to use in order to verify your credential. It can be a centralized API by a government. It can be a decentralized trust registry. But in any case, all your information is always in your wallet. And if you are using a decentralized registry, like a blockchain network, to verify credentials, you never will put personal information, credentials, or personal identifiable data in the trust registry, just verifiable proofs of the credentials. So with the right implementations, data privacy and protection has nothing to do with the source of the trust registry. It only has to do with digital wallets being implemented in the right way.
Thank you very much, Marcos. Andres, do you think? I know that you have a lot of feelings regarding this question. I would like to hear you regarding this.
No, I think, Paulo, that it's a really good question, and I think that I'm going to be picking up on some of the comments that Marcos made just now, and also some of the remarks that Marina made during her presentation. I think that the main issue at the hand is basically when it comes to picking one or the other. I don't think at this stage it's actually a matter of picking one or the other, but actually, as Marcos was saying, like, which is the better implementation when it comes to all of this, and how exactly are we going to be, safeguarding people in the end? I mean, if we're just putting up like a self-sovereign identity system that pushes all the responsibilities to the end user, I mean, we're basically leaving people on their own. And I think that that's not the purpose of data protection, of regulation. I mean, in general, not just data protection. Like, we can probably think about, and I think that in that sense, kind of the examples that Javier was putting forward in the sense of, for example, thinking about what happens in the financial services sector, where you have like also like really strong regulations that protect the end user in the end. So I think that it's a matter of finding a correct implementation that is suitable and doesn't put all the responsibility in the end user, either because they don't have the digital literacy to engage with this, they are overloaded. I think that, for example, when it comes to consent, I mean, I think that it's pretty easy to hit consent as a legal basis, for example, to process personal data. I think that, you can probably find papers that are 15, 20, 30 years old that are already, at the beginnings of the internet age, if you want to call it like the beginnings of Web 1.0, already like, demonizing consent. But at the same time, we're seeing, for example, in the case of Europe, rulings saying that consent is back in the game. So we are pretty much in a situation that, we have to find like a workable solution. And I think that what Marcos was saying, like, I think that is actually, finding an implementation that doesn't put all the responsibility in the end users is probably the way forward, be it, centralized or decentralized.
Yeah, I agree with you in terms of the role of, here in Latin America, role of consent as a preferred lawful basis for data processing activities. This is this heritage from first generation data protection law and all this discussion regarding consent fatigue, I mean, how real is informing this consent, the discussion that we're having right now in Europe regarding, the role of consent in today's, data processing activities, is something that we need to consider when we discuss these kind of topics. Marina, I want to hear you because I know that you are going to probably bring the conversation, the discussion to another different perspective, another different considerations.
Thank you, Pablo. Actually, I think that what Andres was saying, actually, I'm going to build from there. So there was some research that was conducted in Brazil many years ago, 2 researchers, and was qualitative research. They interviewed people asking what they thought about the government having their data. And people were like, yeah, it should have all of my data because I want to be seen by the state. I want to be able to access the state services. I want to have that power. It never occurred to people that actually the state having all of their data could lead to surveillance and to discriminatory practices. People are not aware that the government knowing all about them can be an issue. And it can be an issue. We're talking about Latin America. We're talking about weak democracies. So I think before we discuss all the idea of having decentralized digital ID systems, or, well, not before, but while we have that discussion, we also need to discuss empowering people having data protection literacy, data protection culture, because, okay, we can tell people that they can choose what data they're going to provide to each body, each person, each company, each part of the state, but people will not know how to do that, if people can access EID wallets or whatever electronic means. So I think that discussion really has to be more grounded into the realistic of how Latin America is at this time.
Javiera, what do you think about this question?
Well, I just agree with the panelists, but if if I would have to add something in each of the models, I think the best and most appropriate way to to achieve this goal or this challenge in privacy is probably privacy by design approach, right? Which requires like this complementary bunch of controls, legal controls, operational controls, management controls, and of course technology controls. I know it sounds like an uphill road and difficult road to take, but it's the concept of privacy by design is digging into compliance teams, and I think that's not only because we're facing new regulations that has this concept at the core, but also because we're facing more empowered users, and we need to take a responsibility of it. Even I think that this idea of or this strategy of companies to have this like massive data lakes, it's being left behind. This idea of like, storing data is so cheap, so just go and collect as much as information as we can. It's being left behind because of the many risks involved, actually. So hopefully it's turning into more user-centralized experience, and at the same time, companies are more aware of this concept of privacy by design.
Thank you very much, Javiera. Well, I'm afraid that we ran out of time, and I would like to thank the speakers for bringing us this very interesting session today. And well, on behalf of Privacy Salon and CPDP Brussels, we would like to say thanks for your active participation today. Sadly, we will not be able to receive questions from the audience, but feel free to send us emails, to me. I can analyze all these questions to the panelists, and we can provide an answer to you. Thank you very much, and see you in the next opportunity. Have a nice day. Thank you.